The day my son left me at the nursing home began like any other Tuesday. The sun was shining through the kitchen window, casting soft golden light across the table where I sat with my morning coffee. At 72 years old, I had learned to appreciate simple things. A warm cup of coffee, the sound of birds outside, the comfort of familiar walls that had witnessed nearly 50 years of my life. My son Daniel stood near the doorway, avoiding eye contact. That should have been my first warning. Daniel had always been a terrible liar. Even as a child, guilt would settle across his face before he ever spoke a dishonest word. "Mum," he said quietly, "I think it's time we talked about your future." I smiled and set down my coffee cup. "My future? Daniel, I'm not planning on going anywhere." He forced a laugh, but it sounded strained. "That's exactly what I mean." For the next 20 minutes, he spoke about safety, medical care, professional assistance, and quality of life. The words sounded reasonable, thoughtful even, but something underneath them felt wrong. I had raised Daniel alone after his father died when he was only 8 years old. I worked double shifts as a nurse for nearly 20 years. I missed holidays, I missed sleep, I missed countless opportunities to build a life for myself because every extra dollar went toward giving my son a better future. I paid for his college education. I helped him buy his first house. When his business struggled, I quietly emptied most of my retirement savings to help keep it alive. Never once did I regret it. Not until that Tuesday. "Mom," Daniel said finally, "I've already found a place. A place the way he said it made my stomach tighten." "What kind of place?" "A nursing home." The room suddenly felt colder. I stared at him, waiting for the joke. It never came. "Daniel, I'm not sick. I know. I still drive. I know. I cook, clean, garden, and take care of myself." "I know, Mom." "Then why'd I move into a nursing home?" He looked away. "It's just better this way." Those 6 words broke something inside me. Better for who? Not for me. That question remained trapped into my throat because deep down, I already knew the answer. Better for him. 3 weeks later, Daniel drove me to Maple Grove Senior Living Center. The entire ride was filled with uncomfortable silence. I watched familiar streets disappear through the passenger window. The grocery store where I'd shopped for decades. The church where Daniel had been baptized. The park where I taught him how to ride a bicycle. Every landmark felt like a goodbye. When we arrived, the buildings wasn't ugly. That somehow made everything worse. The staff smiled warmly. The gardens were beautiful. The rooms were clean. But, no matter how pleasant it looked, it wasn't home. Home was the house I had spent nearly 50 years paying for. Home was where every family photograph lived. Home was where my husband's memory still lingered in the old recliner he used to sit in. Home was where I belonged. Daniel carried my suitcase inside. The room assigned to me was small but comfortable. A single bed, a dresser, a chair beside the window. Enough space for survival, not enough space for a life. When everything was unpacked, Daniel glanced at his watch. I should get going. Just like that. No long conversation, no emotional goodbye, no hesitation. I felt my heart crack. "Will you visit?" The question escaped before I could stop it, for a brief moment. Guilt flashed across his face. "Of course, Mom." Then he hugged me, a quick hug, the kind people give strangers. 30 seconds later he was gone. I stood at the window and watched his car disappear down the road. I kept watching long after it was gone, as though staring hard enough might somehow bring him back. The first month was the hardest, not because of the facility, because of the silence between phone calls. The silence between visits, the silence that slowly revealed the truth. Daniel visited once during the first week, once during the second, then not at all during the third. Whenever I called, he sounded busy. Work meetings, business trips, family obligations, always a reason, never enough time. I began spending my afternoons in the common room with other residents. That's where I met Eleanor. Eleanor was 81 years old and possessed the kind of wisdom that only comes from surviving heartbreak. She understood things without needing explanations. One afternoon, she sat beside me while I stared out the window. "Your family stopped visiting." I looked at her in surprise. "How did you know?" She smiled sadly. "Because you're sitting by the window. I didn't understand." She pointed toward several residents. "The ones who still have family sit with everyone else." Then she pointed toward the windows. The ones waiting for people who never come sit there. I couldn't argue because she was right. Weeks became months. The visits grew fewer, the phone calls shorter, the excuses more predictable. One evening, while scrolling through social media, Eleanor showed me something on her tablet. "Isn't this your son's house?" I looked closer. My heart stopped. The photograph showed my home. My house, the house Daniel claimed was too difficult for me to manage. The house he insisted should remain empty while I lived in Maple Grove. Except it wasn't empty. The photograph revealed extensive renovations, new landscaping, new windows, a completely remodeled exterior, and there, standing proudly beside the front door, was Daniel smiling, celebrating. A caption underneath read, "Excited for our dream renovation project. Dream renovation project." My stomach twisted because suddenly everything made sense. The nursing home, the pressure, the timing, the distance, the lies. It had never been about my care. It had been about my house, and for the first time in my life, I wondered whether my son had planned this from the beginning. I spent that night unable to sleep. Questions circled endlessly through my mind. How long had he been planning it? Had every conversation been manipulation? Had every expression of concern been fake? The next morning, I requested copies of my financial records. What I discovered left me shaking. Several documents had been signed during the months leading up to my move. Documents Daniel had presented as routine paperwork, insurance forms, purported updates, administrative requirements. At least that's what he claimed they were. In reality, one document granted him extensive authority over my affairs, another gave him access to financial accounts, a third involved decisions regarding my property. I felt physically sick, not because of the paperwork itself. Because I trusted him completely, the boy I raised, the child I carried through fevers, the teenager I encouraged after every failure, the man I believed would always protect me. That man seemed to have disappeared. 3 days later, an unexpected visitor arrived at Maple Grove. A tall man in a dark suit introduced himself. "My name is Michael Reynolds." I didn't recognize him, but his next sentence changed everything. "I was your husband's attorney." And in that moment, I realized the story wasn't over. In fact, it was only beginning. Michael Reynolds looked to be in his late 60s. His grey hair was neatly combed, and he carried a leather briefcase that seemed older than some of the residents at Maple Grove. I invited him to sit for a few moments. Neither of us spoke. Then he carefully removed a thick envelope from his briefcase and placed it on the table between us. "I've been looking for you for months," he said. My confusion deepened. "Looking for me?" He nodded. "When your husband passed away, he left very specific instructions." My heart skipped. My husband Robert had been gone for nearly 15 years. I still missed him every day. "What instructions?" Michael folded his hands. "He created a trust." I frowned. "A trust?" "Yes." I stared at him. Robert and I had never been wealthy. We owned a comfortable home, a modest savings account. Nothing extraordinary. At least that's what I believed. Michael opened the folder. "Your husband invested very wisely during the last years of his life." My pulse quickened. "How wisely?" The attorney gave me a gentle smile. "Let's just say the value increased significantly." The room suddenly felt smaller. "How much?" Michael slid a document toward me. I looked down, then looked again, then a third time, because surely I was reading it wrong. The number contained far more zeros than I expected. Far more. I felt dizzy. This can't be right. It's correct. I couldn't speak. The trust was worth over $3 million. $3 million. My hands trembled. For 15 years. I had believed Robert left little more than memories. For 15 years, I continued working longer than necessary because I thought I needed the money. And all along this existed, hid, protected, waiting. Tears filled my eyes. Not because of the money, because Robert had somehow continued taking care of me even after death. Michael allowed me a moment before continuing. "There is one condition." Of course there was. There always is. "What condition?" "The trust becomes fully accessible only after a review of your living circumstances." I blinked. My living circumstances? Robert was concerned about something. A chill moved through me. "What?" Michael sighed. He worried that one day people might value your assets more than they valued you. My chest tightened, even from beyond the grave. Robert had known. known what could happen, known what people sometimes become when money enters the picture. Michael continued. He instructed me to evaluate whether any family member attempted to manipulate, isolate, or pressure you for financial gain. Silence filled the room. A long silence, because suddenly every painful memory from the last 6 months returned: the nursing home, the paperwork, the disappearing visits, the house, the renovations, everything. Michael watched my expression carefully. I assumed something happened. For the next hour, I told him everything, every detail, every conversation, every document, every broken promise. When I finished, his face had become very serious. I was afraid of this. I swallowed hard. What happens now? He closed the folder. Now we investigate. 2 weeks later, the investigation began. Financial experts reviewed documents. Preparatory records were examined. Bank accounts were analysed. Phone records were requested. The deeper they looked, the worse it became. Daniel had not merely encouraged me to move. He had been preparing for it for years. He refinanced portions of property connected to my estate. He made financial decisions, assuming future ownership. He even discussed plans to sell the house before I had permanently moved out. Every discovery felt like another knife. The boy I raised had viewed my future as a business opportunity. One afternoon, Michael returned with more news. His expression alone told me it wasn't good. What is it? He sat down slowly. Your son already signed contracts with developers. I stared at him. What developers? The house. My heart sank. He planned to sell it. The words hit harder than I expected, not because of the property itself. Because of what it represented. My marriage, my memories, my life. To Daniel, it had become a transient. To me, it was everything. That night I cried harder than I had cried in years. Not because I hated my son. Because I still loved him. That's the cruel thing about being a parent. Even when your heart is broken, love refuses to disappear. Months passed, the investigation continued. Then one afternoon, Daniel finally visited. His first visit in nearly 9 weeks. He looked nervous, uneasy, almost frightened. I immediately knew something had happened. He sat across from me. Mom. I waited. His eyes shifted around the room. Someone contacted me. Michael. It had to be Michael. I said nothing. Daniel swallowed. They said there's a trust. There it was, not concern, not guilt, not love. Money, the first real conversation we'd had in months centered around money. A deep sadness settled over me. Yes, his eyes widened. You never told me. I didn't know. $3 million? The way he said it made my stomach turn, not disbelief, excitement, pure excitement. I suddenly understood why he came. For a moment he looked like a little boy again. Only this time the innocence was gone. What happens now? He asked. I studied his face, carefully waiting, hoping, praying. For some sign that he regretted what happened. Some sign that he missed me. Some sign that he loved me more than the money. It never came. Instead, he asked another question. When can we access it? We, not you, we. That single word shattered the final illusion I had been protecting. The son sitting before me wasn't here for his mother. He was here for an inheritance. And for the first time in my life, I looked directly into my son's eyes and felt disappointment deeper than grief. I don't know, Daniel. His expression darkened. You don't know. No. He leaned back, frustrated, thinking, calculating. Just as he always did during business negotiations. Except now I wasn't a client. I was his mother. When he finally left, he hugged me, but this time I felt nothing because the hug wasn't for me, it was for the future he imagined. The money he believed was coming. The next morning, Michael arrived, carrying another envelope. His expression was impossible to read. Everything has been reviewed. My pulse quickened, and he placed the envelope in my hands. Robert left one final letter. A letter written 15 years ago for this exact moment. My hands shook as I opened it. The familiar handwriting instantly brought tears to my eyes. My dearest Margaret, if you're reading this, then life has taken a turn neither of us hoped would happen. I know you. You're probably trying to forgive everyone already. That's who you've always been. But before you make any decisions, I need you to remember something. You spent your entire life putting other people first. You sacrificed your dreams for your family. You gave without counting the cost. You loved without conditions. And because of that, there is one thing I need from you. Choose yourself. Just once. Choose your happiness. Choose your dignity. Choose the people who choose you. And never confuse guilt with love. Anyone who truly loves you will never make you earn your place in their life. I love you. Always, Robert. By the time I finished reading, tears streamed down my face. The room was silent. Michael quietly handed me a tissue, then he spoke. The final decision belongs to you. I looked up. What decision? The trust. My heart pounded. What do you mean? Michael took a breath. You decide who receives it, and suddenly everything changed.
Next, for the next 3 days, I barely slept. Robert's letters stayed beside my bed. I read it every morning, every night, sometimes in between. The words echoed through my mind. Choose yourself. Such a simple sentence. Yet it felt impossible. For 72 years, I had chosen everyone else. My husband, my son, my family, my patients. Everyone. The idea of putting myself first felt unfamiliar, almost selfish. But Robert knew me better than anyone. He knew that even after everything Daniel had done, I would still be searching for reasons to forgive him, and part of me already was. A week later, Michael called. The trust review is complete. I took a deep breath. What happens now? There will be a formal meeting. My stomach tightened. Who will be there? You. A pause. Your son. Another pause. And several trustees. I knew immediately what that meant. The moment of truth had arrived. The meeting was scheduled for the following Friday. During the days leading up to it, Daniel suddenly became very attentive. The phone calls returned, 3 in 1 week, then 4. He even visited twice. The same man who had disappeared for months now seemed eager to be present. At first, I wanted to believe it was genuine. I wanted to believe my son had finally realized what he had done. But every conversation somehow found its way back to the trust, the money, the future, the inheritance. Never once did he ask me how lonely I'd been. Never once did he apologize. Never once did he say the words I desperately needed to hear. I'm sorry. Friday arrived. Michael picked me up personally. The meeting took place in a large conference room overlooking downtown. Daniel was already there when we arrived. His wife sat beside him. 2 trustees occupied the far end of the table. Everyone stood when I entered. For the first time in months, Daniel looked nervous, very nervous. Good. Maybe he finally understood there were consequences. We took our seats. Michael opened a thick folder. Today we will discuss the distribution of the Robert Thompson Family Trust. The room became completely silent. Daniel stared at the documents like a man watching a winning lottery ticket being printed. Michael continued. The trust currently holds assets valued at approximately $3.2 million. Daniel's eyes widened. Even his wife struggled to hide her excitement. I noticed, and it hurt. Not because of the money, because nobody looked at me, not one person. They looked at the number. Michael turned another page. According to the trust provisions, the sole beneficiary, Margaret Thompson, has full authority regarding final distribution. The room shifted. Suddenly every eye landed on me. Daniel smiled, a confident smile. The smile of someone who believed the outcome was guaranteed. After all, I was his mother. What mother wouldn't leave everything to her only child? Michael folded his hands. Margaret, the decision is yours. My heart pounded. I looked around the room, at the trustees, at Michael, at Daniel, at the woman who married my son. Then I spoke. I have something I'd like to say first. Everyone nodded. Daniel leaned forward. I could almost see the anticipation in his face. I took a slow breath. 43 years ago, I became a mother. The room remained silent. I wasn't perfect. I smiled sadly. I made mistakes. Daniel shifted slightly. But I loved my son with everything I had. My voice trembled. I worked double shifts. I looked at Daniel. I skipped vacations. I looked down. I sacrificed dreams. Tears filled my eyes, and I would have done it all again. Daniel's expression softened. For a brief moment, I saw guilt. Real guilt, maybe for the first time. Then I continued. When Daniel was struggling, I helped him. He nodded. When he needed money, I gave it. Another nod. When he needed support, I was there. Silence. But when I needed him, the room became still, painfully still. He wasn't there. Daniel lowered his eyes. No one moved. No one spoke. I continued. The hardest part wasn't being sent to a nursing home. His head snapped upward. It wasn't the loneliness. A tear rolled down my cheek. It wasn't even discovering the truth. My voice broke. The hardest part was realizing my son valued what I owned more than he valued me. Daniel looked devastated. Good, he needed to hear it. For months I had carried those words alone. Now they finally belonged in the open. His wife stared at the table. The trustees remained silent. Michael watched carefully. I reached into my purse, then pulled out Robert's letter. This letter changed my life. I held it up. My husband asked me to choose myself. My hands trembled. And for the first time, I'm going to do exactly that. Daniel suddenly looked afraid, truly afraid. The confidence vanished. The assumptions disappeared. Reality had arrived. Michael nodded gently. Have you made your decision? I looked directly at my son, the little boy who once held my hand crossing the street, the teenager who cried after his first heartbreak, the man I loved more than my own life. Then I answered, yes. The room held its breath. I have. Michael opened a document. Please proceed. I took one final breath, then spoke. I am donating $1 million to build housing and support programs for abandoned seniors. The room froze. Daniel blinked. Shock spread across his face. I continued. I am creating a scholarship fund for nursing students. Another $500,000. Michael smiled slightly. He already knew. The trustees exchanged impressed glances. I wasn't finished. I am establishing a community assistance foundation in my husband's name. Another large portion. Daniel looked pale, very pale. The future he imagined was disappearing with every sentence. Finally, Michael asked quietly, and the remainder? The room fell silent again. I turned toward Daniel, his eyes filled with tears, not excitement, not greed, fear, regret, maybe even shame. For the first time in months, I saw my son instead of the man chasing money. Then something unexpected happened. Daniel began crying, not like Lawai, really, crying, the kind of crying that comes from a broken heart. Mom, his voice cracked. I don't deserve anything. The room went silent, completely silent. I failed you. Tears streamed down his face. I failed you so badly. Nobody moved. Nobody interrupted. Months of guilt poured out of him. I kept telling myself I was helping. He shook his head, but I wasn't. More tears. I was selfish. His shoulders trembled. I cared more about the house than I cared about. Every word felt genuine, painful, real. Then he looked directly at me. I'm sorry. The words hit harder than I expected because they were the words I'd waited months to hear. I'm so sorry, Mom. For a moment, nobody spoke. I simply stared at my son. And suddenly I saw it, the regret, the shame, the realization. He finally understood, not the value of the money, the value of a mother. I stood slowly, walked around the table, and hugged him. The room disappeared. The money disappeared. The trust disappeared. For a few seconds, there were only a mother and her son, both crying, both broken, both trying to find their way back to each other. When I finally stepped back, Daniel wiped his eyes. What happens now? I smiled through tears. Now. He nodded. I squeezed his hand. Now we start over. Years later, people would ask whether I regretted my decision, whether I regretted giving so much away, whether I regretted making my son face the consequences of his actions. The answer was always the same. No, because the greatest inheritance I left my son wasn't money. It was a lesson that changed both our lives. Money can build houses, but it cannot build family. Money can buy comfort, but it cannot buy love. And when life reaches its final chapter, the people who truly matter won't remember what you owned. They'll remember how you treated them. My son almost learned that lesson too late. Almost, but not quite, and sometimes almost is enough.